Hi guys, welcome to this code film with regards to internal bank fraud. We've looked at um, the storyline, we've looked at the client side scribble, and in this code film, I want to look at the operation of the internal bank fraud. So, without much talk, let's start Eclipse. We have Eclipse here, we have our piece of code, and we're going to run our application. This application has a whole lot of technical juice, of which I'll take my time to, in another film, to walk you through the technical juice that's found in the film. But the agenda for today is more of testing the application and triggering that internal bank fraud and how the system supports internal bank fraud detection or reporting, more of logging. Yeah. Now let me pull up my sticky notes so that my viewers and subscribers will have an agenda to follow. All right, so okay, so as I said, we've looked at the introduction, the story part, the action of the operation. So we're going to test the app. We're going to log in as a teller, and we'll log in as a teller supervisor. So we'll log in as a teller. We also log as a teller supervisor. Then we'll have the case for no fraud commitment by the teller. Then we'll have the case for the fraud commitment by the teller. Then we're going to inspect as a teller. We're going to look at the console logging for testing and file logging for offline features. I think as I said earlier, I'll keep this one in a different video so that um, I'll keep this one in this video so that you guys will appreciate the little bit of software engineering that went into it. So this one is more of, we've said that there's internal bank fraud. It can occur. We said it's between customers and tellers. We are saying that in an environment where we have no digitization, in a no digitization environment, um, fraud is going to be rampant due to lapses in systems. So we are basing that argument to come up with a system that will help us to prevent such a thing from occurring without tellers being aware of such an occurrence, and because they have no idea of what goes into building a software. We know what goes into building a software, and we know how we can implement what can trigger such a situation. So Tellers has no idea that he's being monitored. It's just like the way you're online and then you get recommendation based on what you interact with. Behind the scenes there's an algorithm that is studying you, that's looking at your behavior. It could be data science, it could be machine learning, and that's basically feeding you information to a system, and the system is knowing more about you, looking at your pattern. That's the same way if you have no idea of IT, you're just a teller, you just go into the bank application, you think you can be smart and you can go have your own ways around certain things, provided the bank hasn't um, designed or supported uh, such checks or such internal controls. Then yeah, internal controls is the right way. Then I must say that um, then that one is the banks is an issue with the bank, not with the person per se. But as long as the banks implements those internal controls, then tellers have no say when such an offense happens. I actually made references of, I'll leave the reference in the comment section of a story like that occurred between a banker, or not between a bank, but Cow Bank. There was a fraud issue at Cow Bank some time ago with a teller, and that's been the case for our code films. Yeah, so I think this is a story. Yeah, so this is the story that has brought up the whole code films. Yeah, where he did a fraudulent signing. That it was revealed that the accused had forged the signatures of the compliant on cash withdrawal forms and managed to steal that money from their accounts. So if we had a teller supervisor and teller report event system, I'm sure a teller supervisor would have seen such a thing, because in banks, every teller has a head of tellers in a bank. So the supervisor tellers line that processes a variety of financial transactions as its tellers and more complex tasks. So if there's a system that can help them to monitor all these things, such a thing will work, especially in real time. Okay, I've done enough talk. Let's just go straight into the code film. And the code is working. That's the beauty. It's working just with basic Java. As I said, you look at that in the other video. So let's run our program. Remember, it is one application. We have just one application, but different users. So we have Kojo is logging in. He's a teller. We have Isinam is logging in. She's a teller supervisor. We have um, Kin Kinsey is logging in. He too is a teller. Everybody has their own role, but the application is just one. You can't have every person having their own, in quotes, dedicated application. This application for teller, this is application for teller supervisors. Then later we make the two applications talk. Yeah, that one is there, but it's a teller portal. So if you are logging in based on your access rule, based on what data we have about you saved in the database, we do our work. So let's pull up our database and let's query some tellers. Let's get some teller supervisors and let's log in separately. We'll log into we have two separate browsers because we want to have two distinct in quote users acting as if they are at different locations. So Chrome will be at maybe teller number 6, and then the Microsoft Edge will be for teller supervisor who is probably located on the 3rd floor of the bank. So he's not actively sitting there with the teller, but due to internet and web application development, you can directly see whatever the teller is doing in real time. Okay, so let's have some labels so we know what we're about. So let's say this will be for tellers, for teller, and then you have another one here to say oh sorry, and we have this one to say for supervisor view. Just kindly remember that Microsoft Edge is for the supervisor and Microsoft and Google Chrome is for the teller. Let's do away with that. Okay, so please let's check our database. Let's query some tellers. Let's first of all log in. Let's log in. You could have done this through the console. Maybe in another CodeFilm, we'll look at how to use the console to query. We already have our SQL commands here because I was working on it earlier. Yeah, just checking one or two things. So let's just query. First of all, let's use the database. We want to use the employee database, employees DB. So this is the employees DB. At the moment, it's selected at tutorial 1. We want to change and use this schema. So use employees DB. So right now we've moved to employees DB, and then we can actually view all the tables that are located inside employees DB. We have the tellers supervisor and we have the tellers. So let's query from our tellers table. Let's query from our tellers first. So we have our tellers here. These are our tellers, and I wouldn't want to have two separate views, so let's close this one. Okay, so let's also have a new, and let's query for, these are for tellers. Forget what's on top here, we just ignore that. And let's query also for teller supervisors, and then we're going to look at the teller supervisors table. So select all the tellers from this table and Control plus enter. We have our tellers here. Okay, then finally we have our customer DB. They are not employees of the same bank, so we're not gonna, they are not directly mapped yet, in no way. It's just for the purpose of CodeFilm. Let's have a new query, and let's use the bank com customer DB. We are now located here. Let's view our tables, and let's look at the casual customers. Forgive me if I say casual customers, but in the banking industry, in the banking fraternity, we have different, I won't say different, but customers are all customers are not necessarily the same, in quotes. Some are retail, some are corporate, some are senior members, a whole lot of stuff. Some are students, so that's why I made the name casual customers. So we have our, alright, so we have our tellers data, we have our teller supervisors, and we have our casual customers. Okay, so this is the database, and let's start out. Let's log in as a teller first. So let's log in as kwekudo@bank.com. Forget about the console, we'll look at the console for now. kwekudo@bank.com, or rather type it. So that's kwekudo@bank.com, and let's pick its password. Its password is my password, so let's log in with this my password. Okay, so Kwekudo has entered the application. As you can see, he logged in with his email address, but his name has been retrieved from the database as well. And this is dashboard, something simple, nothing fancy. A teller has approached him now. So a teller has approached Kwekudo that he wants to withdraw money from his account. So the first scenario that we made mention of that we're going to look at is the no fraud commitment at the teller. So we are going to look at that case, and I'll show you how we know that this is a no fraud scenario. Okay, then not forgetting, let's log into as a teller supervisor, so you have a glimpse that there are two separate applications running. There are two separate views by one application, all based on backend and business logic. Another CodeFilm for that. Okay, so let's go to Microsoft Edge. Let's log in. Let's look for a teller supervisor. Let's log in with James Kofi. So let's log in with jacob@bank.com, and his password is jack2021. Okay. Alright, so Jacob is in his application. He's located on the third floor, and Kwekudo is also in the application. Two views, but one application, happening in real time. Please don't forget that. So now, no fraud commitment. Let's look at the no fraud commitment. If it's a no fraud scenario, we know that the teller we'll first of all have to query the account number of the customer, because they'll fill a withdrawal slip. There's no digitization in place. Fill a withdrawal slip, enter the customer's account name, pop up his first name, know his available balance, and because listen very carefully, because a customer is facing a teller, the teller will definitely input the amount the customer is requesting to withdraw from his account. That's how we know that it's a customer generated withdrawal. If we study the story about the car bank's issue, or the case that happened over there, I'll definitely leave it in the um, description. You'll find out that the fraudulent signature that the teller did and went ahead to process it, um, the condition or the mood or the state that or the state of mind that he had at that time wouldn't have allowed him to do his necessary checks as much as he would have. Because if a customer is in front of you, you definitely put in the amount and know that this is from a customer. But if you don't input the amount, and then let's say you know the number of denominations you're working, you know the unit, to prevent the system from knowing how much you've processed, you can pick the unit and then you enter any the denomination, select the denomination, enter any unit, and you have a certain amount. This 20 cedis, let's put 100. So this 2 times 100, that's 200 Ghana cedis in all. So that's the total unit, that's the total amount. So when you're buying, when you go and get a receipt from the bank gives you that receipt, and the receipt mostly shows denomination in units. It doesn't show you the amount that you actually withdrew, but it shows you the money that the bank had at that time. If they had, let's say 10,000, each teller had 10,000. Each teller is going to work with the units that they have. So that if, let's say I had um, 500 CDs, I had so and so. It's based on the units that they take out, so that when they go back at the end of the day, I'm just saying based on observation and internet. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, they have a way of knowing how much each teller has used, and each teller has disbursed some kind of mathematics or accounting over there. So it comes in the form of a box. So each teller has this kind of money sitting at their teller post, like in the form of a box or a teller gate or something of that sort. So is that they know how much each teller has worked with, not necessarily what you enter into the system. Please don't get me wrong, but you understand when we trigger the CodeFilm, something of that sort. So because at the end of the day, we have to know how much. At the end of the day, how much money did you work with? That was your working money. Like I worked with this because of this number of customers. So that kind of a thing. So yeah, it's possible that you can defraud or you can steal from customers in that way, because I wonder how many teller supervisors or tellers or branch managements will be at the bank at the end of the day to do all those reconciliation. There has to be a software or something. So there'll definitely be a loophole whereby tellers can steal, unless, so if the ladies hadn't visited the bank, or the elderly women hadn't visited the bank, that means um, the teller would have gone away with it. And also they made not a mistake, but if you don't subscribe to e-alert, also you also put your own self at a risk. So thumbs up to Bank for their digitization approach now. To us, I really enjoy their digitization. It's one of the best. Alright, so let's say we select, let's go for some more money, 500, and then let's look at customer that at the moment you won't have any impact on the account. I didn't write code for that. I just wrote code to show of the fraud. So you won't see any deductions yet. It didn't cover my use case, or my scenario didn't cover that. So all you just gonna know is how the fraud is detected. So let's work with Peter and Nkrumah, because Peter and Nkrumah has a lot of money. And this is more of a UAT. It's not, we're not in pilot or production or prod. So we query, see, we're able to retrieve his name from the database. Then we select that we want to go with 5 CDs and 100 units, and we enter the amount 500 CDs. So once we enter the amount, we know that the teller did this way because the Peter Nkrumah, committed himself to withdraw 500. So we process status successful withdrawal, and let's just refresh this to see. You see customer generated withdrawal, and it says no instances of fraud. Yep. So once he refreshes the page, he sees what he wants. There's a way of making it automatic, but I want you to appreciate this CodeFilm. Alright, so now how do we know? That's the no fraud commitment. Let's have another go at it. And yes, another go. Let's work with something else. So we've done 10 times. Let's do 60 or 100. So this 1,000 cedis. Yeah, so let's process this one too as well. Refresh customer generated withdrawals of 2 cases. Alright, now let's commit the fraud. The fraud is now going to be committed because you know that Peter Nkrumah has money, and the teller needs to also to have some money. So he queries his name. We are now committing the fraud, and he says, I just want to take let's go with a lower denomination or something that makes sense. 5 cedis and 10 units of 5 cedis. So we are taking 10 units of 5 cedis, so that's 50 cedis. So we will enter the amount because once you enter the amount, you are committing yourself that Peter Nkrumah did the withdrawal, but you did the withdrawal. It's like the TOEFL system. You see, the TOEFL system, if you are going to register by yourself and you don't add the extension, TOEFL will know that it's an individual that's trying to do it. But as long as you go and see any of the registered TOEFL bodies that you want to register your exams or prepare for the test, they have an extension ID that they commit themselves. So if you're a customer and then you're a student and you don't know, and then the extension ID you think is +233, that's when your payment will fail. So it's just like this. It's just the same scenario. So we process this. It will say successful withdrawal, alright, because it has to be successful. But behind the scene, you have to know it's teller generated withdrawal. And the reason is that there has to be internal controls. If you don't allow the status to be successful withdrawal, how would you know if tellers are doing their work or not? And if there's a fraud checks, internal control has to be placed. You can't move internal control out of the bank and trust the teller completely by saying, let's move this kind of checks. It's not done. It's the same with the fraud. It's the same with the TOEFL system. Why would we want students to be paying for themselves when why would we want students to pay for themselves when we can pick merchants for a particular purpose? So based on the business logic, they implement based on the working environment and the business environment you find yourself inside. So this is just one instance. So let's first open this. We see the teller that committed the fraud, the customer that he attacked, the account number, the amount he took, the date he committed the fraud, and then the time he committed the fraud. So it's now 5:40 GMT. So it says 5:41. So that was just a minute ago. There's a fraud that has been committed. Now let's log out and log in as a different teller. So it works for another teller. Let's look for another teller. Let's use PA2. I'll just copy and paste this. New here is a password. Let's commit the fraud here to as well. Let's commit the successful transaction. We still use, let's change the customer. So 05 belongs to 05 belongs to Samuel Long. So Samuel Long has entered the bank. We've queried his name, we found his details. Samuel Long comes and says, for today I'll take 50 and 100. So I believe this is 5,000. Yeah, but he's taking all his money. It's more than his available balance, so it won't work. Those checks have not even implemented. So let's work with something more realistic. He will take some. Uh, okay, 200 is not bad. So we implemented 200. Okay, so realize that customer generated withdrawals goes to 3, and this is the teller supervisor view by a different teller. So it could be multiple tellers, and to make the system more robust, you can implement, you can use multi-threading where it's very necessary. And unless commit the fraud again, no amount. Let's just go with this. We took 5 CDs 80 times, so we're looking at 450 here. And we process status successful withdrawal. So we have another instance of fraud, and this one comes from piece A do Samuel Long, account number, the amount. Wait, what did I process? 40 times 5. So it's not 450, sorry. The date committed and then the time. So let's have another go at it. Let's have another go at it again. Five times 8. Oh, sorry, it's not 450s. But I wrong 450. Let's make it 90. Let's commit the fraud again. So this is another instance of fraud, 450. So this is the system. So when it goes into our instances, you can see all the fraud instances and how the time that it took place. So the thing that the teller is not aware of such a thing. All he sees is status successful withdrawal, and he goes back and he does his withdrawal process. Doesn't see what's going on in the background. I'll have to sorry. Doesn't see what goes on in the background. Yeah, so that's the CodeFilm. That's this CodeFilm. That's the execution process or the operation. So you can see it's being processed in real time. Come back to our dashboard, refresh. Realize that our fraud instances just keeps on rising in the time. So if the teller logs out, teller supervisor logs out, and another teller logs in. He also sees all the fraud instances, but this is Agnes. The other teller supervisor was Jacob. So the data is alive, but this is when they are online. So what happens when they are offline? So we look at all those features in another CodeFilm, the offline, the console logs for testing. So in our next CodeFilm, we're going to look at all this stuff, mostly console that's logging for testing, online features, that's when you're having a UAT testing, and also have file logging for offline feature and other investigation auditing. We are not using any form of database for persistency of saving the fraud details because I didn't plan of doing it that way. I just planned of working with the file system based on the Java knowledge I had. So you see how we write to a file for offline feature and for other investigation audit, and then the file is being saved on, it could be saved on a server or something of that sort. So based on the use case, you have to come up with your own engineering, whether you save to a file or you save to a database or you write to a file, and why do you want to write to a file and how you write into a file, what kind of file type, is it an XML, is it a binary, is it a text file? So you have to explain all that. So later on we will look at console logging. So there are two things that are happening at the same time. We have a console logging for testing, Most of the time when you're in a banking environment and you're testing, you have to work with the console to see the response from the application. That's mostly for testing. And if it has to be happening that we want to make this more live, if you go to an ATM, you want to monitor all transactions, then console login will be good for monitoring all transactions in real time. Yeah, so just that in case any ATM breaks down, the banks know that, hey, this ATM at this terminal at this branch has broken down. And also a file logging for offline feature. So the reason is that if I'm to close this session and I'm to close this session, I'm to start the application again, can I still log into the local host, um, report event login, and find my data? Is it saved? So if I log in as this supervisor, remember Agrabi is a supervisor. Agrabi is a supervisor. Supervisor. Agrabi. Agra. So you realize that when we log in, our data is alive because our server is alive. So what if our server shuts down? Let's shut down our server. Now the server is offline. Our server is down. Most of the time, what happens in the banking environment? Alright, so now let's log out and let's start our server again. Is our data going to be saved? And the answer is it shouldn't be saved because we are not writing to a database. We are writing to a file, and the file is keeping the details for offline features. So let's start our server again. I thought I closed the server. So let's close it. I didn't just look at the login, so let's restart. We stopped our server. We are starting our server again. Remember, we shouldn't be able to see all this information when the server starts afresh because the details are being saved to a file, not to a database for retrieval or to read. No CRUD operations over here. Yeah, so you see no data is not available when we shut down the server. So where is the data now? The customer is coming back in 6 days. I didn't subscribe to e-alerts. I've been attacked. I know because when I go and I was trying to make sure it was insufficient from the teller. So where do we find all this data? That one will be in another CodeFilm. Thank you for sticking around. Please like the video. You can comment. Feel free to comment, and you can also suggest what the kind of CodeFilms you would like to see next. Thank you for your time, and this has been CodeFilms, and stay tuned for the last video.